Ambassador Keelera pressed her translucent fingers against the viewing port of the evacuation ship, watching as another Zephyrian colony ship exploded in the distance. The brilliant flash of white light momentarily illuminated the twisted metal hulks of what had once been their proud defensive fleet. Now they drifted like broken toys in the void, testament to how completely outmatched they had been. The harvester ships moved through the debris field with mechanical precision, their dark hulls absorbing what little starlight reached this distant corner of the galaxy. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, and they moved with the terrible patience of creatures that knew their prey had nowhere left to run. Keelera had watched 12 worlds die in the past month. 12 beautiful worlds, each with billions of souls, reduced to barren rocks stripped of everything useful. Behind her, the evacuation ship's communication officer, a young Zephyrian named Veltar, worked frantically at his console. His 4 arms moved in practice patterns across the holographic interface, sending out the same desperate message they had been broadcasting for weeks. The Coalition emergency frequency carried their plea across the galaxy, but, so far, the response had been the same crushing silence they had faced since the Harvesters first emerged from the dark spaces between stars. Any response, Veltar? Keelera asked, though she already knew the answer from the defeated slump of his shoulders. Nothing from the Galactic Council, Ambassador, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The Centaurian Empire acknowledges our transmissions, but states they cannot spare forces. The Andromedan Republic sent their regrets. The word came out like a curse. The Crystalline Collective won't even respond directly. They're all too afraid. Keelera couldn't blame them. The Harvesters had appeared without warning 18 months ago, emerging from a void beyond the galaxy's edge like a plague. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted beyond the systematic consumption of inhabited worlds. They didn't conquer in any way the galactic species understood. They simply arrived, overwhelmed any defense, and stripped each planet of its biosphere, its minerals, its people. Everything useful was taken aboard their massive ships, leaving behind dead rocks floating in space. The worst part wasn't their overwhelming technology or their ruthless efficiency. It was their complete silence. They never communicated, never negotiated, never even acknowledged that the species they were destroying were sentient. To the Harvesters, the galaxy's civilizations were just another resource to be collected. Widen the frequency range, Keelera ordered. Try the old colonial channels, the mining consortium emergency bands, anything we haven't used yet. Veltar's hands hesitated over his controls. Ambassador, those frequencies reach the quarantine zones, the forbidden systems. If we broadcast there, if we don't, we die anyway, Keelera said simply. The Harvesters will be here in 6 days. Our children are on this ship, Veltar. Our future. What happens to galactic protocol if we're all dead? The young officer's resolve firmed, and he began expanding their transmission range. Keelera turned back to the window, watching as another of their escort ships was caught by a Harvester energy beam. The ship's shields flared and died, and then the vessel itself began to come apart at the molecular level, its matter streaming toward the alien vessel like glowing sand. Captain Zordan approached from the bridge, his ceremonial warrior's crest dulled with exhaustion. The Zephyrians were an old race, proud and sophisticated, known throughout the galaxy for their art and philosophy. Zordan's people had been star travelers for 3,000 years, had helped found the Galactic Council, had never lost a major conflict. Until now. How many ships do we have left? Keelera asked without turning around. 7 evacuation vessels, 2 military escorts, Zordan replied. We're carrying roughly 40,000 souls, the last 40,000 Zephyrians in existence. The weight of that statement settled over them like a funeral shroud. A civilization that had once numbered in the hundreds of billions, reduced to the population of a small city. And even that remnant would be gone in days unless a miracle occurred. There's something else, Zordan continued hesitantly. Our long-range sensors are picking up Harvester scout ships near the Andorian system. And the Bethan colonies went silent yesterday. Keelera closed her eyes. The Andorians and Bethans have been their closest allies for centuries. If they were under attack, it meant the Harvesters weren't just hunting the Zephyrians. They were beginning a systematic harvest of this entire arm of the galaxy. How long before they reached the core worlds? She asked. At their current rate of expansion, maybe 2 years. 3, if the major powers actually unite and fight instead of just watching everyone else die. But they wouldn't unite. Keelara knew that with bitter certainty. Each species would convince themselves they had time, that the harvesters would be stopped by someone else's sacrifice, that their own worlds were too distant or too well defended to be threatened. It was the same mistake the Zephyrians had made when the first reports came in from the Rim. Behind them, Veltar suddenly straightened at his console. Ambassador, I'm getting something on the expanded frequencies. It's very faint and very far away, but someone's responding. Keelara and Zordan rushed to the communication station. The signal was indeed weak, barely more than background static, but there was a pattern in it. A structured response to their emergency transmission. Can you clean it up? Identify the source. Veltar's hands flew over his controls, running the signal through every filter and enhancement protocol they had. Slowly, impossibly, words began to emerge from the static. But they weren't in any language in the galactic database. It's coming from the Sol system, Veltar said, his voice filled with disbelief. The quarantine zone. Grid reference. Oh no. Oh no. What? It's from Earth, Veltar whispered. The message is coming from Earth. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Every member of the crew knew the stories about Earth, though they were usually told as cautionary tales to children. The death world at the edge of civilized space, home to the creatures that every galactic power had agreed must never be contacted. The one place in the galaxy that was off-limits to everyone. That's impossible, Captain Zordan said. Earth is pre-warp, primitive. They can't even leave their own star system. But Veltar was shaking his head, his 4 hands trembling as he worked to decode the transmission. The signal is definitely coming from their planet. And Ambassador, I think they understand our language. The response is following galactic standard emergency protocols. Keelara stared at the console display, watching the alien symbol scroll past. Somewhere in that distant, forbidden system, someone had heard their cry for help. Someone who shouldn't have been able to understand it, let alone respond to it. What does it say? She asked quietly. Veltar was quiet for a long moment, cross-referencing the alien language against their linguistic databases. Finally, he looked up, his large eyes wide with something that might have been hope. Message received and understood. He translated. Help is coming. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. He paused, checking his work again. And there's something else. A single word repeated several times. I think it's their name for themselves. Human. Outside the ship, another Zephyrian vessel died in silence, its light fading against the stars. But for the first time in months, the survivors weren't watching their doom approach with helpless despair. Someone had heard them. Someone was coming. They just had no idea what they had unleashed upon the galaxy. The harvesters continued their methodical approach, their sensors detecting the small cluster of escape ships ahead. To their ancient, mechanical minds, this was just another harvest to be completed, another species to be collected. They had done this 1,000,000 times before, across 100,000 worlds. But they had never encountered humans before. 3 days later, Captain Zordan was awakened from an uneasy sleep by alarms throughout the ship. He rushed to the bridge, expecting to find harvester ships finally, closing in for the kill. Instead, he found his crew staring at their sensor displays in complete bewilderment. Sir, the sensor officer reported, we're detecting massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the system. Something's coming out hyperspace, but the energy signatures, they're unlike anything in our database. The first human ship emerged from faster-than-light travel with no fanfare, no grand announcement. It simply appeared where empty space had been a moment before, its hull a matte black that seemed to absorb the surrounding starlight. It was followed by another, then dozens more. Within minutes, an entire fleet materialized around the Zephyrian evacuation ships. The human vessels were strange to galactic eyes. Where most civilized species built their ships with graceful curves and elegant lines that spoke of artistic achievement, the human ships were all angles and brutal efficiency. They bristled with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays, their designs optimized for only one purpose: war. They're scanning us, Veltar reported. Multiple active sensor sweeps, but they're not targeting weapons. I think they're checking to make sure we're really Zephyrians. Ambassador Keelara stepped forward, her heart racing. Open a channel. All frequencies. The response came immediately, in perfect Zephyrian standard dialect. Zephyrian vessels, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call. Please provide current tactical situation. The voice was crisp, professional, and utterly alien. Not just because it came from a different species, but because it carried an undertone of barely contained violence that no civilized race would ever allow to enter their communications. This was the voice of a predator offering help to prey, and somehow that was exactly what they needed. Admiral Chun, Keelara replied, finding her voice. This is Ambassador Keelara of the Zephyrian Coalition. We're the last survivors of our people. The entities we call the Harvesters have destroyed our worlds and are pursuing us. They will arrive in approximately 48 hours. There was a brief pause. When Admiral Chin responded, there was something new in her voice. Something cold and deadly that made Keelara's protective instinct scream warnings even as she felt a surge of desperate hope. Ambassador, please transmit all available data on these harvesters. Tactical capabilities, known weaknesses, previous engagement records. Everything you have. Admiral, you don't understand. The harvesters are unstoppable. They've destroyed every fleet that's faced them. Entire star nations have fallen without slowing them down. Another pause. Then, almost gently, Ambassador, you called for help from Earth. That means you called the Deathworlders. Let us worry about what's possible. As if to emphasize the point, more human ships continue to arrive. Massive carriers that dwarfed anything in the Zephyrian fleet. Sleek destroyers that moved through space with predatory grace. And behind them all, something that made Keelara's breath catch in her throat. A ship the size of a space station, its hull studded with weapons that could crack planets. The humans had brought a dreadnought to rescue 40,000 refugees. What kind of species brought planet-killing weapons on a rescue mission? Admiral, Keelara said quietly. How did you reach us so quickly? Earth is 3 months away at maximum warp. The answer, when it came, changed everything Keelara thought she knew about the galaxy's most feared species. Ambassador, we've been monitoring galactic communications for the past 50 years. We've been tracking the Harvester threat since it began, and we've been waiting for someone to ask for our help. Admiral Chin's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. The Galactic Council may have quarantined us, but they never said we couldn't leave. As the last of the human fleet took position around them, Keelara realized that the stories about Earth had been wrong. The humans weren't primitives trapped on their world by their own limitations. They had been trapped by everyone else's fear. And now that someone had finally broken the silence, the galaxy was about to learn why that fear had been so very, very justified. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the observation deck of the UES Prometheus, watching the Zephyrian evacuation fleet through the reinforced viewport. The alien ships were beautiful in their own way, all flowing lines and crystalline structures that caught and reflected the distant starlight. They looked like works of art rather than spacecraft, which told her everything she needed to know about the people who built them. Behind her, the tactical display showed the approaching Harvester fleet in cold, clinical detail. 67 capital ships, each one roughly the size of a city, accompanied by thousands of smaller vessels. The sensor data the Zephyrians had provided painted a picture of technology that was both advanced and utterly alien. Energy weapons that dismantle matter at the molecular level. Shields that seem to absorb and redirect rather than simply deflect incoming fire. And something the Zephyrian analysts called consumption beams that could strip a planet's biosphere in a matter of hours. They're impressive, said Commander Marcus Torres, her tactical officer. A compact man with graying temples and scars across his left cheek from the Martian colonial uprising. He had been studying the Harvester capabilities with the focused intensity that had made him one of Earth's premier military analysts. But they're not invincible. Look at this engagement pattern from the third battle of Kepler. The holographic display showed a reconstruction of the battle, based on sensor data recovered from a Zephyrian dreadnought's final transmission. The Harvester ships moved in perfect formation, each vessel supporting the others with overlapping fields of fire and defensive screens. They advanced steadily, methodically, absorbing the desperate attacks of the defending fleet without breaking formation or showing any apparent damage. They fight like a machine, Chen observed. Perfect coordination, no individual initiative, no adaptation to unexpected tactics. Exactly, and that's their weakness. Torres highlighted several points in the battle recording. Watch here, when the Zephyrian admiral tries a flanking maneuver. The harvesters respond perfectly to counter it, but they don't anticipate it. They don't start repositioning until the flanking force is already in motion. Chen nodded slowly. She had seen similar patterns in the other battle recordings the Zephyrians had provided. The harvesters were tactically perfect, but strategically rigid. They responded to threats with overwhelming force, but only after those threats became apparent. It was the kind of limitation that could be exploited if you were willing to take enormous risks. "Admiral," came a voice from behind them. Chen turned to see Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, the fleet's xenobiologist, approaching with a data pad in her hands. The scientist looked troubled, her usually composed features tight with concern. "I've been analyzing the biological data from the harvester attacks. There's something you need to see." The tactical display shifted to show a cross-section analysis of what the harvesters did to the worlds they conquered. It wasn't just destruction, it was systematic harvesting on a scale that defied comprehension. Every piece of organic matter, from the smallest microorganism to the largest sentient being, was collected and processed. The mineral wealth of entire planets was extracted down to the core. Even the atmospheres were stripped away and stored. "They're not invaders in any sense we understand," Dr. Reyes explained. "They're more like cosmic locusts. They consume everything useful and move on, leaving nothing behind but empty rocks. But here's the disturbing part. They're selective about what they take." The display zoomed in on the composition analysis of various harvested worlds. "See these patterns? They're specifically targeting worlds with complex ecosystems and advanced civilizations. They ignore barren planets, even ones with valuable minerals. And they've bypassed several primitive species entirely. They're farming," Chen realized with growing horror. "They're not just randomly consuming worlds. They're cultivating galactic civilization and harvesting it when it reaches the right level of development." "That's my conclusion as well," Dr. Reyes confirmed. "Which means this isn't just an invasion. It's the end of a cycle that's probably been going on for millions of years. The harvesters appear, harvest all the advanced civilizations, then disappear back into the void to wait for the next crop to mature." The implications were staggering. How many times had this happened before? How many galactic civilizations had risen to the stars only to be consumed when they reached some predetermined threshold of development? And if that was true, then the current galactic powers weren't fighting an invasion. They were cattle being led to slaughter. "Admiral," Commander Torres interjected, "incoming transmission from the Zephyrian flagship. Ambassador Kielera is requesting permission to come aboard." Chen considered for a moment. Officially, this was humanity's first contact with an alien species, though of course that wasn't actually true. Earth had been monitoring galactic communications for decades, and there had been several discrete encounters over the years. But this was the first time humans would be working openly with aliens, and the precedent they set here would shape everything that followed. "Grant permission. Full diplomatic honors. And, Commander, make sure our guest sees the memorial wall on her way to the conference room." Torres nodded understanding. The memorial wall was a list of every human who had died in the Titan War, the Proxima conflict, and the other battles that had forged Earth's military into what it was today. It served as a reminder of what humans were capable of when pushed to extremes. An hour later, Ambassador Kielera materialized in the Prometheus's transport bay along with two of her advisors. The Zephyrians were tall, graceful beings with translucent skin that showed the faint tracery of their circulatory systems. Their large, multifaceted eyes took in everything with obvious curiosity and barely concealed nervousness. Chen was waiting for them, dressed in her formal uniform with its simple decorations that somehow managed to suggest vast and terrible experience. She had chosen her escort carefully. Representatives from each of Earth's major military services, including a few veterans whose augmentations were subtle but noticeable to those who knew what to look for. Ambassador Kielera, Chun said, offering a formal bow in the Zephyrian style. Welcome aboard the Prometheus. I am Admiral Sarah Chun, Commander of the Earth Defense Force's Rapid Response Fleet. The Zephyrian ambassador returned the bow, though Chun could see the barely controlled trembling in her limbs. Whether from exhaustion, fear, or simply the gravity difference aboard the human ship, she couldn't tell. Admiral Chun, on behalf of the Zephyrian people, I thank you for responding to our call for aid. Though I must confess, your arrival raises as many questions as it answers. I'm sure it does, Chun replied. Please, follow me to the conference room. I believe we have much to discuss. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Chun watched the Zephyrian delegation's reactions carefully. The humans they passed were courteous but professional, showing none of the awe or deference that most galactic species seem to expect when meeting aliens. If anything, the crew treated the Zephyrians with the same respectful attention they would show any allied officers. But Chun noticed how the aliens' eyes lingered on certain details. The blast doors that could seal off sections of the ship in seconds. The emergency battle stations positioned at regular intervals. The way every corridor was designed to be defensible if necessary. The Prometheus had been built for war, and it showed. The memorial wall was their next stop, and Chun watched as Ambassador Keelera read the names scrolling past in holographic display. Hundreds of thousands of them, representing less than a century of human military casualties. The numbers were staggering for a species that supposedly had never left its own star system. These are your war dead? Keelera asked quietly. Some of them, Chun confirmed. These represent casualties from our major conflicts over the past 90 years. Most of our wars have been internal, fought between different human factions as we expanded through our local star group. Internal wars? One of Keelera's advisors asked with obvious shock. You fight among yourselves? Constantly, Chun said with a slight smile. Humans have a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. We've been preparing for a very long time. The conference room was smaller than Ambassador Keelera had expected, with a simple table surrounded by chairs designed for multiple species. The walls displayed real-time tactical information about the approaching Harvester fleet, but what drew her attention was the star chart showing the local stellar neighborhood. Earth's position was marked with a simple blue dot, but the surrounding systems were color-coded to show the extent of human exploration and colonization. The map revealed the truth that the Galactic Council had been trying to ignore for decades. Humanity had not been contained to their home system. They had been expanding steadily outward, establishing colonies and outposts throughout the local star group. You've been lying to us, Keelera said, though without anger. The quarantine was supposed to keep you on Earth. The quarantine was supposed to keep us from contacting galactic civilization, Admiral Chun corrected. No one ever said we had to stay home. And, frankly, after monitoring galactic communications for decades, we weren't particularly eager to introduce ourselves. She gestured to the tactical display, showing the Harvester approach. Your civilization has been aware of the Harvester threat for over a year. In that time, how many species have offered military assistance to the worlds under attack? None, Keelera admitted. The major powers all claimed they were too distant to help, or that they needed to defend their own territories first. Exactly. That told us everything we needed to know about how galactic politics work. Every species looking out for themselves, hoping the threat would be someone else's problem until it was too late to stop it. Commander Torres activated another display, showing the projected path of Harvester expansion through the galaxy. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach the core worlds within 2 years. But they're not expanding randomly. Look at this pattern. The display highlighted the systems that had been attacked, and a clear progression emerged. The Harvesters were systematically working their way through the galaxy's spiral arms, consuming advanced civilizations in order of their technological development and population density. They're saving the best for last, Dr. Reyes added. The core worlds, with their massive populations and advanced technology, represent the richest harvest. Everything else is just appetizers. Ambassador Keelera studied the projections with growing horror. How long have you known about this pattern? We identified it about 6 months ago, Admiral Chun replied. We've been preparing ever since. Preparing how? One of the Zephyrian advisors asked. What can one species do against a threat that has destroyed entire star nations? Admiral Chin's smile was not entirely reassuring. Ambassador, Let me show you something that isn't in any of your galactic databases. The real reason the Council was so eager to quarantine Earth. The display shifted to show a recording from 50 years earlier, grainy footage of a human space battle near Jupiter. But it wasn't the primitive chemical rockets and nuclear weapons that galactic intelligence suggested humans should possess. The ships were sleek, advanced, armed with directed energy weapons that could slice through asteroid-sized targets with ease. This is from the Titan War, Chen explained. A conflict between Earth's government and the outer colonies over resource allocation. The war lasted 3 years and involved over 1 million military personnel on both sides. It ended when we deployed the first generation of our planet killer weapons. The footage showed a human dreadnought firing a single beam at Titan's surface. The moon didn't explode dramatically. It simply ceased to exist. Its matter converted to energy in a controlled cascade reaction that left nothing behind but glowing plasma. We rebuilt Titan afterward, of course. Chen continued conversationally. Amazing what you can do with matter compilers and enough raw materials. But the point was made. We had developed weapons that could destroy worlds, and we were willing to use them on ourselves if necessary. The conference room was silent except for the hum of the ship's environmental systems. Ambassador Keelara stared at the display, trying to process what she had just seen. The humans hadn't just been hiding their space travel capabilities. They've been hiding the fact that they were already a major military power. "Why are you telling us this?" she asked finally. "Because in 46 hours, the harvesters are going to arrive expecting to face the same kind of resistance they've encountered everywhere else. Elegant ships, energy shields, civilized tactics used by people who still believe war is something that can be contained and controlled." Admiral Chen leaned forward. "They're not ready for humans." "What makes you so confident?" "Because we've been studying them, Ambassador. For over a year, we've been analyzing every battle they've fought, every tactic they've used, every weakness they've displayed. And we've come to one inescapable conclusion." Chen's smile was purely predatory now. The harvesters have never fought a species that evolved on a death world. They've never faced an enemy that considers total war to be the natural state of existence. The tactical display updated to show the current positions of both fleets. The harvesters continued their methodical approach, maintaining perfect formation and showing no sign that they were aware of the human presence. "They're about to," Admiral Chen said quietly. "And the galaxy is about to learn why the Council was right to be afraid of us." The Harvester fleet emerged from hyperspace with the same mechanical precision they had displayed at every world they had consumed. 67 massive vessels, each 1 kilometer in length, arranged in a perfect sphere formation that allowed for optimal coverage of the target area. Their sensors immediately began cataloging the small cluster of ships ahead, 9 primitive vessels that barely registered as worth their attention. But for the first time in their million-year history, the Harvester's advanced scanning systems failed to detect the true nature of what they were approaching. The human ships hung in space like shadows, their stealth systems making them appear as nothing more than cosmic debris. The Zephyrian evacuation fleet was clearly visible, exactly as intended, serving as bait for the trap that was about to be sprung. Admiral Chun stood on the Prometheus's bridge, watching the tactical display with the calm focus of a predator about to strike. Around her, the crew moved through their final preparations with practiced efficiency. These were veterans of the Titan War, the Proxima conflict, and dozens of smaller engagements that had forged Earth's military into something the galaxy had never seen before. "All ships report ready," Commander Torres announced. "Stealth systems holding steady. The Harvesters show no indication they've detected our presence." "Estimated time to their weapons range of the Zephyrian ships?" Chen asked. 14 minutes, Admiral." Chen nodded, checking the deployment of her forces one final time. The human fleet had spread out across a sphere nearly a light hour in diameter, using gravitational lensing and advanced stealth technology to remain invisible until the moment they chose to reveal themselves. It was a formation that would have been impossible for most galactic species to coordinate, requiring split-second timing across vast distances. But humans had been perfecting this kind of warfare for decades. Every ship in the fleet was linked through quantum entanglement communicators, allowing for instantaneous coordination regardless of distance. Every captain knew their role, and every crew was prepared to execute their part of a plan that would have been considered impossibly complex by galactic standards. Signal from the Zephyrian flagship, the communications officer reported. Ambassador Keelara is asking when we plan to engage. Chen allowed herself a slight smile. Tell the ambassador that we're already engaging. She'll understand in about 30 seconds. Aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Ambassador Keelara watched the Harvester fleet approaching with a mixture of terror and fascination. Even knowing that the humans were somehow hidden nearby, she couldn't see any evidence of their presence. The sensors showed only empty space and the advancing wall of alien death that had consumed her entire civilization. Ambassador, Veltar called from his console. I'm detecting some kind of gravitational anomaly near the largest harvester vessel. It's very subtle, but his words were cut off as space itself seemed to tear open directly behind the Harvester Command ship. What emerged was unlike anything in the galactic databases. A vessel that was less a ship than a mobile fortress, its hull studded with weapons that no civilized species would have dreamed of mounting on a spacecraft. The UES Ragnarok was Earth's first and only planet killer, a dreadnought designed for one purpose: the complete annihilation of anything that threatened human survival. It was 2 kilometers of concentrated death, powered by controlled black holes, and armed with weapons that could crack continents. And it had just materialized less than 1,000 kilometers from the Harvester Command vessel. The effect was instantaneous. The Ragnarok's main guns, weapons that drew their power from the controlled collapse of artificial singularities, fired at point-blank range. The energy beam that struck the Harvester Command ship wasn't just destructive. It was a fundamental violation of the laws of physics, as most species understood them. Matter didn't just explode or melt. It ceased to exist, converted directly to energy in a cascade reaction that propagated through the target's hull. The Harvester Command ship, which had survived the concentrated fire of entire battle fleets, simply vanished. One moment it was there, a kilometer of advanced alien technology. The next, there was nothing but expanding plasma and the shocked silence of a galaxy watching its greatest nightmare being challenged for the first time. But the Ragnarok was just the beginning. All across the Harvester formation, space began tearing open as human ships dropped their stealth systems and emerged from hyperspace at point-blank range. The tactical doctrine they employed was something no galactic military would have considered: deliberate close-quarters engagement with an enemy whose weapons could disintegrate matter at the molecular level. Commander Sarah Kim watched from the bridge of the UES Valkyrie as her ship materialized directly beneath one of the massive harvester vessels. At this range, she could see the alien ship's hull plating, could make out the strange geometric patterns that covered its surface. Her crew had less than 3 seconds before the Harvester's defensive systems would adapt to their presence. "Fire everything," she ordered. The Valkyrie unleashed its full arsenal in a coordinated barrage that would have been suicidal against any civilized opponent. Fusion torpedoes, antimatter missiles, directed energy weapons, and kinetic projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds. The attack was so intense that the space around the Harvester ship filled with exotic energy discharges and gravitational distortions. But what made the attack truly devastating wasn't the raw firepower. It was the targeting. The humans had been studying Harvester ships for over a year, analyzing every battle recording, every sensor scan, every piece of debris. They had identified the critical systems, the weak points, the precise locations where concentrated fire could cause cascading failures. The Harvester ship's shields flared and died under the assault. Its hull, designed to withstand the elegant energy weapons used by galactic civilizations, cracked and buckled under the brutal kinetic impacts of weapons that threw chunks of matter at significant fractions of the speed of light. And then, the fusion torpedoes reached their target. The explosion was visible across the entire star system, a brief new star that outshone the local sun. When the glare faded, there was nothing left of the Harvester vessel but expanding debris. Across the battlefield, the same scene was playing out dozens of times. Human ships appeared from nowhere, delivered devastating attacks at point-blank range, and then vanished back into hyperspace before the remaining Harvesters could coordinate a response. It was a style of warfare that violated every principle of civilized combat, aggressive, brutal, and utterly without mercy. But it was also devastatingly effective. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display as her fleet systematically dismantled the Harvester formation. The aliens were trying to adapt, she could see that. Their ships were beginning to cluster together for mutual support. Their defensive systems were recalibrating to account for the new threat patterns. But they were adapting to fight a conventional enemy, and humans were anything but conventional. Phase 2, she ordered. The second wave of human ships emerging from hyperspace wasn't trying to hide. These were the heavy assault carriers, massive vessels that dwarfed even the Harvester ships. They materialized at maximum weapons range and immediately began deploying their fighter screens. Thousands of small, fast attack craft that swarmed toward the remaining alien vessels like angry insects. But these weren't the fighters that galactic militaries would recognize. Each one was essentially a guided missile with a human pilot, designed to penetrate enemy defenses through sheer numbers and overwhelming aggression. They carried nuclear warheads, antimatter charges, and kinetic penetrators. And their pilots had been trained in the same doctrine that governed all human military operations: acceptable losses in service of mission completion. The Harvester point defense systems, designed to intercept the relatively slow and predictable weapons used by galactic civilizations, were overwhelmed within minutes. Thousands of human fighters broke through their defensive screens and began attacking critical systems with suicidal determination. Many of them were destroyed in the process, but for every fighter lost, they inflicted damage that would have required an entire squadron of conventional ships to achieve. Ambassador Keelera watched the battle unfold with a mixture of awe and horror. The humans weren't just fighting the Harvesters. They were systematically destroying them using tactics that no civilized species would have considered. They were trading their own lives with casual efficiency, treating their own ships and crews as expendable resources in service of a larger tactical objective. "This is madness," Veltar whispered beside her. "They're throwing themselves at the enemy like predators," Keelera finished softly. "They're not trying to minimize casualties or preserve their ships. They're trying to kill the enemy as quickly and efficiently as possible, regardless of cost." On the tactical display, the Harvester formation was collapsing. Ships that had seemed invulnerable just minutes before were exploding or going dead in space. The aliens' perfect coordination was breaking down as their command and control systems were systematically targeted and destroyed. But the most terrifying moment came when one of the surviving Harvester ships attempted to retreat. The massive vessel began charging its hyperspace engines, preparing to escape and report on this new threat to whatever intelligence controlled the Harvester fleet. Admiral Chin's response was immediate and brutal. "Interdict a net. Full activation," she ordered. The space around the fleeing Harvester suddenly filled with gravitational distortions as human ships activated technology that the Galactic Council had banned centuries ago. Interdictors, weapons that created artificial gravity wells to prevent faster-than-light travel, were considered a violation of the fundamental principles of civilized warfare. They trapped enemy ships in normal space, making retreat impossible. The Harvester ship found itself caught like a fly in amber, its hyperspace engines unable to function in the distorted space-time around it. And then the human dreadnoughts opened fire. The destruction was methodical and complete. The Ragnarok and its sister ships took turns firing their main weapons, each shot precisely calibrated to cause maximum damage while keeping the target ship intact enough to suffer the next attack. It was torture on a stellar scale, a demonstration of what happened to enemies who threatened human civilians. When the barrage finally ended, there was nothing left of the Harvester fleet but debris and radiation. 67 ships that had conquered half the galaxy had been destroyed in less than 2 hours by a human fleet that hadn't existed in any galactic database just days before. The aftermath was almost as shocking as the battle itself. Human ships moved through the debris field with clinical efficiency, collecting samples, analyzing wreckage, and cataloging everything they could learn about Harvester technology. There was no celebration, no expressions of triumph. The crews went about their work with the same professional competence they had shown during the battle, already preparing for the next engagement. Admiral Chen opened a channel to the Zephyrian flagship. When Ambassador Kilera's image appeared on the screen, the alien's face showed a mixture of gratitude and barely concealed fear. "The immediate threat to your people has been eliminated," Chen reported. "Our analysis teams will need several days to process the data we've collected, but I can tell you that the Harvesters are not invincible. They can be defeated." "Admiral," Kilera said carefully, "what you've accomplished here today, it will change everything. The Galactic Council, the major powers, they'll all want to know how you did this. They'll want to form alliances to learn your tactics." Chen's expression didn't change, but something cold entered her eyes. "Ambassador, we've been monitoring galactic communications for 50 years. We've watched civilizations rise and fall, seen species cry out for help that never came, observed the Council's endless debates while worlds died. Do you really think we're eager to join that system?" "Then what do you want?" Kilera asked. "We want to save the galaxy," Chen replied simply. "But we're going to do it our way. The Harvesters aren't just another invasion force, Ambassador. They're a cosmic-level threat that requires a cosmic-level response. And that response is going to require tactics and strategies that the galactic powers will find uncomfortable." The transmission ended, leaving Ambassador Kilera staring at a blank screen. Around her, the Zephyrian evacuation fleet began moving toward the human ships, seeking the protection of the species that had just rewritten the rules of galactic warfare. But in the depths of space, other forces were already beginning to stir. The Harvester fleet was gone, but their destruction had not gone unnoticed. Across the galaxy, ancient sensors were registering the energy signatures of the battle. Warning signals were being transmitted to distant recipients. And deep in the void between galaxies, something vast and terrible was beginning to take notice of the small blue world, whose children had just announced their presence in the most violent way possible. The Harvesters had been the advanced scouts, the Harvesters who prepared the way for something far worse. And humanity had just painted a target on themselves that could be seen across the universe. The Galactic Council chamber on Coruscant Prime had not seen such chaos in over 2,000 years. Representatives from dozens of species filled the massive amphitheater, their voices raised in a cacophony of fear, anger, and desperate debate that echoed off the ancient crystalline walls. At the center of it all, projected in brilliant holographic detail, was the aftermath of humanity's first open engagement with the Harvesters. Chancellor Vextai of the Centaurian Empire stood at the primary podium, his ceremonial robes rippling with the nervous energy patterns that betrayed his species' emotional state. Around him, the gathered representatives displayed their own signs of distress. The Andromedan's gill slits fluttering rapidly, the crystalline collective's harmonic frequencies discord with stress, the Bethan delegation huddled together in obvious fear. "The question before us is simple," Vextai announced, his amplified voice cutting through the noise. "The quarantine around the Sol system has been irrevocably breached. The humans have revealed themselves as a space-faring civilization with military capabilities that exceed our most pessimistic projections. What is our response?" Senator Kreval of the Andromedan Republic was the first to respond, her translator converting her rapid gill speak into standard galactic. "Our response should be gratitude. They destroyed the Harvester fleet that was slaughtering the Zephyrians. They succeeded where our combined fleets have failed repeatedly. They succeeded using prohibited weapons and tactics," countered Ambassador Torgon from the Crystalline Collective, his mineral form resonating with disapproval. "Interdictors, planet-killer weapons, systematic destruction of retreating enemies. These humans fight like barbarians." "Barbarians who win," Kreval shot back. "While we've been debating proper engagement protocols and acceptable casualty ratios, they destroyed an entire Harvester fleet in under 2 hours. Perhaps we need more barbarity and less civilization." The chamber erupted in angry responses from dozens of species. The Tauri delegate accused the Andromedans of warmongering. The Nexian representative questioned whether human victories were worth the moral cost. The newly arrived Zephyrian observer, one of only 12 survivors from a delegation that had once numbered in the hundreds, sat in stunned silence as the galaxy's powers argued about the species that had saved her people from extinction. High Admiral Zenkar of the Council Defense Force rose from her position near the Chancellor's podium. The veteran Centaurian had served in the military for over 3 centuries, commanding fleets that had maintained galactic peace through diplomacy and the threat of overwhelming but precisely applied force. Her war record was impeccable, her tactical reputation unquestioned, and her current expression was deeply troubled. "I've reviewed the battle recordings provided by the Zephyrian survivors," she announced, her voice cutting through the debate. "The human fleet demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally change our understanding of what is possible in space warfare." The tactical display activated, showing the human attack on the Harvester formation. Note the precision of their initial assault. They identified and targeted critical systems with accuracy that suggests intelligence gathering far beyond what we believe possible from a quarantined world. Their weapons technology appears to be at least 2 centuries ahead of our current capabilities. And their tactical doctrine— She paused, clearly struggling with what she was about to say. "Their tactical doctrine is unlike anything in our databases. They engage at point-blank range, with weapons designed to cause maximum destruction. They trade their own ships and personnel with an efficiency that suggests they view both as expendable resources. Most disturbing of all, they show no hesitation to use weapons and tactics that we have banned as crimes against sentience." The Zephyrian observer, Ambassador Kalera's aide Veltar, rose slowly from his designated seat. The young diplomat was one of the few beings in the chamber who had actually witnessed human military doctrine in action, and his testimony would carry significant weight. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice still weak from the trauma of watching his civilization's near extinction, "I understand your concerns about human methods. But I would ask you to remember one thing. They came when we called. Every other power in this chamber received our distress signals. Every one of you had the opportunity to respond to a dying civilization's cry for help. None of you did." The chamber fell silent. It was an uncomfortable truth that no one wanted to acknowledge, but the transmission records were clear. The Zephyrian Coalition had sent desperate pleas for assistance to every major power in the galaxy. All of them had been ignored or refused. "The humans monitored our transmissions for months," Veltar continued. "They tracked the Harvester advance, analyzed their tactics, prepared a response. And when we finally broke quarantine protocol and broadcast on emergency frequencies, they came immediately. They risked everything to save 40,000 refugees they had never met, from a species they had never formally contacted." Chancellor Vextai gestured for order as the chamber began to buzz with uncomfortable murmurs. "The Zephyrian perspective is noted and appreciated. However, we must consider the broader implications of human involvement in galactic affairs. High Admiral, what is your assessment of their current military capabilities?" Zenkar activated a new display showing the human fleet composition. "Based on observed vessels and tactical deployment patterns, I estimate the human fleet that engaged the Harvesters represents no more than 15% of their total military capacity. They have clearly been building up their forces for decades, while maintaining the pretense of being confined to their home system." The numbers were staggering. If the human force that had destroyed the Harvesters was just a fraction of their total military, then they possessed a fleet that rivaled the combined naval forces of the major galactic powers. "More concerning," Zenkar continued, "is the evidence of technological advancement that should have been impossible under quarantine conditions. Their ships demonstrate mastery of spatial manipulation, artificial gravity control, and exotic matter physics that we are only beginning to understand. The question is not just how they developed these capabilities in isolation, but why they chose to reveal them now." The answer came from an unexpected source. A new transmission was being received from the human fleet, broadcast on all council frequencies with encryption that had somehow bypassed every security protocol they possessed. The chamber's communication systems activated automatically, projecting the image of Admiral Sarah Chun onto the main display. The human commander appeared calm and professional, but there was something in her eyes that made every species' primitive survival instincts scream warnings. This was a predator, barely contained by the thin veneer of diplomatic courtesy. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Admiral Chun began, her words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun, commanding the United Earth Defense Forces First Fleet. I am addressing you today to clarify humanity's position regarding current galactic events. Chancellor Vextai stepped forward. Admiral Chun, while we appreciate your assistance in the recent Harvester engagement, your unauthorized entry into galactic affairs represents a violation of quarantine protocols established for the safety of all civilized species. Chin's expression didn't change, but something cold entered her voice. Chancellor, with respect, the quarantine was established by the Council to contain humanity. It was never accepted by humanity. We have been expanding throughout our local star group for over 50 years, establishing colonies and monitoring galactic communications. We know about your debates, your politics, your failures to respond to genuine threats. The chamber erupted in chaos. The revelation that humans have been actively violating quarantine for decades while the Council remained oblivious was an intelligence failure of unprecedented proportions. But Chen wasn't finished. We also know about the Harvester advance pattern. She continued once order was restored. Our analysis indicates they're systematically working their way toward the core worlds, consuming advanced civilizations in order of technological development and population density. At their current rate of expansion, they will reach Coruscant Prime within 18 months. High Admiral Zenkar leaned forward. Admiral, our intelligence estimates suggest 2 years minimum before any threat to the core worlds. Your intelligence is wrong, Chen replied bluntly. The Harvester fleet we destroyed was a reconnaissance force. The main invasion fleet is already in motion, moving through the Outer Rim territories using hyperspace corridors that your sensors cannot detect. We estimate 3 main battle groups, each composed of over 500 capital ships, approaching the galaxy from different vectors. The tactical display updated to show new data, shipping lanes, sensor readings, gravitational anomalies that painted a picture of a massive coordinated assault. The Council chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. They weren't facing a single Harvester fleet. They were facing an invasion force that dwarfed anything in recorded galactic history. How do you know this? Fencelor Vixtoi demanded. Because we've been fighting them, Chin said simply. The engagement you observed was not our first contact with the Harvesters. We've been conducting operations against their advance forces for the past 8 months. We've destroyed 17 scout fleets, captured multiple specimens for analysis, and mapped their command and control networks. Senator Creval of the Andromedans was the first to grasp the implications. You've been at war with them. This entire time while we debated and delayed, you've been fighting. The war began when they consumed the first inhabited world, Chen replied. Everything else has just been the galaxy slowly realizing it was under attack. But now the real battle is about to begin, and the Council has a choice to make. What choice? Vextai asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. You can continue trying to fight them using civilized tactics and acceptable casualty ratios while your worlds burn one by one. Or you can accept that this is a war for survival that requires survival tactics. You can work with us to implement a defense strategy that actually has a chance of success. Ambassador Torgon's crystalline form vibrated with disapproval. And what would this strategy entail? Chen's smile was not reassuring. Total mobilization of galactic resources. Conversion of civilian infrastructure to military production. Implementation of conscription protocols for all spacefaring species. Deployment of prohibited weapons systems. And coordination of all defensive forces under a unified command structure. Unified under human command, no doubt, Zenkar said dryly. Under the command of whoever is most qualified to win, Chen replied. We don't care about galactic politics or species pride. We care about survival. The Harvesters don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, and they don't show mercy. The only way to stop them is to be more ruthless, more efficient, and more willing to pay the price for victory than they are. The chamber fell silent as the Council representatives absorbed the implications of what they were hearing. Alliance with humanity would mean abandoning centuries of carefully established military protocols, accepting the use of weapons they had banned as immoral, and placing their fates in the hands of a species they had tried to quarantine out of fear. But the alternative was extinction. Veltar rose again from the Zephyrian observer seat. Honored representatives, I have seen what happens to civilizations that face the Harvesters alone. I have watched worlds die while help was refused or delayed. And I have seen what humans can accomplish when they decide something is worth fighting for. He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of beings whose species might be facing the same fate his own had barely escaped. The question is not whether you trust the humans, he said quietly. The question is whether you want to survive. Outside the council chambers, Admiral Chen's transmission continued, but now she was addressing not just the assembled representatives, but the entire galaxy. Her message was being broadcast on every frequency, translated into every known language, reaching every inhabited world in civilized space. To all sentient beings receiving this transmission, she said, the time for debate is over. The harvesters are coming for all of us. Earth stands ready to fight, ready to defend any world that asks for our protection and accepts our methods. We make no apologies for what we are or how we fight. We offer no guarantees beyond this. We will never stop fighting, we will never surrender, and we will never abandon those who stand with us. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to contemplate an offer of alliance from the species they had tried so hard to avoid. In the council chamber, representatives began the frantic communications with their home worlds that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. But in the deep space between stars, other forces were already in motion. The main harvester fleets had detected the destruction of their advance force, and ancient protocols were being activated. Somewhere in the void, entities older than most star systems were preparing to deal with the upstart species that had dared to resist their inevitable harvest. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's introduction to galactic affairs was just the beginning. The real war was still to come. 6 months after first contact, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable. The elegant trade routes and peaceful diplomatic corridors that had defined galactic civilization for millennia had been replaced by massive industrial complexes and military staging areas. Every spacefaring species was now part of the largest mobilization effort in recorded history, and the architect of this transformation was the species that had been quarantined precisely to prevent this kind of change. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the war room aboard the UES Prometheus, now designated as the flagship of the Combined Galactic Defense Force. The chamber hummed with activity as representatives from dozens of species worked alongside human officers to coordinate the defense of 30,000 inhabited worlds. The sight would have been impossible to imagine just months before. Centaurian admirals taking orders from human tacticians, Andromedan engineers working on human weapons designs, crystalline collective analysts sharing intelligence with species they had barely acknowledged before the war began. Status report, Chin requested, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos. Commander Torres stepped forward, his uniform now bearing the insignia of the combined forces. The outer rim fortifications are complete. We've established defensive positions at 14 key hyperspace junctions with full interdiction capabilities. The main production facilities are exceeding targets by 12%, and recruitment numbers from the member worlds continue to exceed projections. The tactical display activated, showing the current state of galactic defenses. What had once been the peaceful core worlds were now ringed with weapons platforms that could destroy small moons. The major trade routes had been converted into defensive corridors lined with automated weapons systems and sensor arrays, and scattered throughout the galaxy, a new kind of ship patrolled space. Hybrid vessels that combined human weapons technology with alien defensive systems and faster-than-light capabilities. But the most significant change wasn't visible on any tactical display. It was the transformation of the galactic mindset from one of civilized restraint to one of survival at any cost. The harvester threat had stripped away millennia of diplomatic pretense and revealed the fundamental truth that had driven human evolution. Sometimes the only way to preserve life was to become very, very good at ending it. Dr. Elizabeth Reyes approached the command station, carrying a datapad that displayed the results of 6 months of intensive xenobiology research. The scientists had been working around the clock with alien researchers to understand the true nature of their enemy, and her findings had reshaped their entire approach to the war. Admiral, we've completed the analysis of the harvester specimens captured during our raids on their forward bases, she reported. The results confirm our worst fears and provide our best hope for victory. The display shifted to show a detailed cross-section of a harvester entity. What they revealed was not a single organism, but a collective entity made up of millions of individual components, each one a specialized tool designed for a specific function. The harvesters weren't just alien invaders. They were a form of distributed intelligence that could adapt and evolve in real time. The individual harvester ships are essentially organs in a vast organism, Dr. Reyes explained. They share information instantaneously across galactic distances, adapt to new threats within hours, and can modify their own structure and capabilities based on what they encounter. Every engagement teaches them something about their opponents. Admiral Chen studied the data with growing understanding, which explains why they've been so successful against civilized resistance. Every species they've faced has fought them using conventional tactics, giving them the information they needed to develop perfect countermeasures. Exactly. But they've never faced anything like human tactical doctrine before. Our willingness to use asymmetric warfare, to sacrifice our own forces for strategic advantage, to employ weapons and tactics that violate their understanding of rational behavior. It's causing system-wide confusion in their collective intelligence. The implications were staggering. The human approach to warfare, developed through millennia of internal conflict on a death world, was acting like a computer virus in the harvester collective consciousness. Every time they encountered human forces, their attempts to analyze and counter human tactics created logical paradoxes that propagated through their network. How long before they adapt? Chen asked. Unknown, but we've identified something that might give us a decisive advantage. Dr. Reyes activated a new display showing the quantum resonance patterns of the Harvester Collective. Their distributed intelligence relies on instantaneous communication across galactic distances. If we could disrupt that communication, even temporarily, it would be like giving a collective organism a stroke. Individual ships would be cut off from the larger intelligence, forced to operate independently. Commander Torres leaned forward, immediately grasping the tactical implications. How do we disrupt communication on that scale? We've been working with the Crystalline Collective's resonance engineers and the Andromedan quantum physicists. The theory is sound. A properly calibrated harmonic weapon could create a cascade failure in their communication network. But the power requirements are enormous. We would need to coordinate the simultaneous firing of every capital ship weapon in our combined fleets. Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment, studying the technical specifications. The plan was audacious even by human standards, requiring precise timing across hundreds of star systems and the cooperation of every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy. The margin for error was essentially zero, and failure would likely mean the destruction of the entire combined fleet. What's the probability of success? She asked. Approximately 37%, Dr. Reyes replied honestly. The variables are too numerous to calculate precisely. And if we don't try it, based on current engagement patterns, the harvesters will reach the core worlds in 6 weeks. Even with our improved defenses, the probability of successfully defending against their main fleet is less than 8%. The choice was clear, if terrifying. They could attempt a plan with a 1 in 3 chance of success, or they could wait for almost certain defeat. For most civilizations, the decision would require weeks of debate and careful political consideration. Admiral Chun made her decision in less than 10 seconds. Prepare the fleet for Operation Final Gambit, she ordered. All ships, all systems, coordinated strike. We get one chance at this. 3 weeks later, the main harvester fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Terran system. 500 capital ships, each one larger than a human city, accompanied by thousands of support vessels and fighter craft. It was a force that dwarfed anything the galaxy had seen before, and it moved with the terrible confidence of a predator that had never encountered serious resistance. But as they advanced toward their primary target, something unprecedented happened. Instead of the usual desperate defensive positions and last-ditch evacuation attempts, they found themselves facing the combined might of the entire galaxy. The battle line stretched across light hours of space. Human dreadnoughts flanked by Centaurian battlecruisers and Andromedan carriers. Crystalline collective harmony ships providing defensive coordination while Bethan assault frigates moved in perfect formation with Earth destroyers. Dozens of species that had barely cooperated before the war now fought as a single, unified force. At the center of the formation was the Prometheus, Admiral Chen's flagship, surrounded by the command ships of every major galactic power. For the first time in galactic history, the fate of civilization rested in the hands of a truly united fleet. All ships report ready, Commander Torres announced. Harmonic resonance weapons charged and synchronized. We're detecting some kind of confusion in the Harvester formation. Their advance has slowed. Admiral Chun allowed herself a grim smile. The Harvester's collective intelligence was trying to process the unprecedented sight of galactic unity and finding no reference patterns in their vast database. They had conquered 1,000 civilizations, but they had never faced a truly united galaxy before. Open channel to all ships, Chun ordered. This is Admiral Chun to all vessels of the combined Galactic Defense Force. Today we fight not as separate species, but as one people. Today we show the universe that some things are worth any sacrifice. Today we win. The response came as a chorus of voices in dozens of languages, united in purpose despite their vast differences. Humans and aliens, predators and prey, ancient enemies and new allies, all speaking with one voice. For the galaxy, they said. For survival. For the future. Admiral Chen raised her hand, and across the vast battle line, hundreds of ships prepared to fire their weapons in perfect synchronization. The targeting solution was locked, the harmonic frequencies calibrated, the moment of decision at hand. Fire. The combined firepower of the galactic fleet discharged simultaneously, creating a resonance wave that propagated across subspace at faster-than-light speeds. The effect was invisible to normal sensors, but its impact on the Harvester fleet was immediate and catastrophic. For the first time in their million-year history, the Harvester collective intelligence experienced something approaching panic. The harmonic weapon didn't just disrupt their communications. It created a feedback loop that propagated through their entire network, severing the connections that allowed them to function as a unified entity. Individual Harvester ships found themselves cut off from the collective, forced to operate on their own limited intelligence for the first time. They began to maneuver erratically, their perfect formations breaking down as confusion spread through their ranks. "It's working," Dr. Reyes reported, her voice filled with amazement. "The collective intelligence is fragmenting. Individual ships are showing independent behavior patterns." But Admiral Chun wasn't celebrating yet. The Harvesters were wounded, not defeated, and a wounded enemy could still be extremely dangerous. "All ships advance to engagement range," she ordered. "Remember, they're confused but still deadly. Stay in formation and follow your targeting priorities." What followed was the largest space battle in galactic history. Human ships led the charge with their characteristic aggression, closing to point-blank range to deliver devastating attacks before retreating to let their alien allies deliver precision strikes. The Centaurian fleet provided mobile fire support, while the Andromedan carriers deployed fighter screens that swarmed over the disoriented Harvester vessels. But the most remarkable sight was the cooperation between species that had viewed each other with suspicion just months before. When a crystalline collective harmony ship was overwhelmed by Harvester attack drones, a squadron of human destroyers immediately moved to provide cover. When a Bethan assault frigate's shields failed under concentrated fire, Andromedan fighters swept in to draw the enemy's attention. The battle raged for 18 hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt once the Harvester collective intelligence was disrupted. Individual ships, cut off from their support network, felt a concentrated fire from coordinated attacks. The alien invasion force that had seemed unstoppable just days before was systematically destroyed by a galaxy that had finally learned to fight as one. When the last Harvester ship exploded in a brilliant flash of exotic energy, the combined fleet held its position in space, waiting for Admiral Chen's next order. But for a long moment, there was only silence as the reality of their victory settled in. "Admiral," Commander Torres said quietly, "we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. The Harvester attacks on other systems have stopped. Their ships are going dormant. Their invasion fleets are withdrawing. I think we won." Chen nodded slowly, still staring at the debris field that had been the Harvester main fleet. Send a message to all ships. Return to base for repairs and refit, and prepare a general broadcast to all inhabited systems. The transmission that followed reached every corner of civilized space, carried on frequencies that penetrated hyperspace to ensure no world would miss the message. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Combined Galactic Defense Force. Her voice rang out across the stars. The Harvester threat has been neutralized. All member worlds are hereby released from emergency mobilization status. The war is over. But as celebrations began on thousands of worlds, Admiral Chun remained on the bridge of the Prometheus, staring out at the stars. The immediate threat was gone, but the galaxy had been fundamentally changed by the war. The old boundaries between species have been broken down, replaced by bonds forged in combat against a common enemy. What happens now, Admiral? Commander Torres asked. Chun was quiet for a moment, considering the question. The galaxy had been saved, but at the cost of its innocence. The gentle, civilized species that had tried to quarantine humanity now carried human weapons and had learned human tactics. They had been forced to become something harder, more ruthless, more willing to pay the price for survival. Now we rebuild, she said finally. But we rebuild as one people, not as separate species hiding from each other. The galaxy has learned that sometimes the only way to preserve civilization is to be willing to fight for it. Outside the ship, the stars looked the same as they always had. But the galaxy had changed forever. The age of isolated civilizations and careful diplomacy was over, replaced by an era of cooperation born in the fires of total war. And at the center of it all, the species that had once been quarantined as too dangerous for contact now stood as the protectors of galactic peace. The Deathworlders had come when their help was needed, and the galaxy would never be the same. The war was over. The real work of building a united galaxy was just beginning.